In soundproofed rooms where musicians chase perfection, something listens to every wrong note, waiting to sing them back. Maya slid her keycard through the reader for practice room 7, 9:15 p.m. The Harmony studios were nearly empty now, just her and maybe one other musician somewhere down the carpeted hallway. Perfect. She needed the isolation. The soundproofed booth welcomed her with its familiar amber lighting and foam-covered walls. 20 by 12 feet of acoustic sanctuary where she could chase perfection without judgment. She'd booked a late slot specifically. No curious ears, no time pressure. Just her and Vivaldi's Winter Concerto until they kicked her out at midnight. Maya assembled her violin with practiced efficiency, running her fingers along the fingerboard to check for any temperature warping. The instrument had cost her 3 months' salary, but it sang like liquid silver when she played it right. When she played it perfectly. She positioned herself in front of the mirror that dominated one wall, adjusted her posture, and lifted the bow. The first notes of the opening movement filled the small space, clean and precise. Good. She moved through the familiar passages, muscle memory guiding her fingers through the complex fingering patterns. Then came the section that had been haunting her for weeks, a rapid ascending run that required absolute precision. She'd practiced it hundreds of times, but something always went wrong. Tonight would be different. Maya drew her bow across the strings, fingers dancing up the fingerboard. The notes climbed higher, faster, and then, there. The slight wobble on the high F sharp dot. The microscopic hesitation that turned music into noise. But that wasn't what made her pause. The echo came back wrong. Not wrong in an obvious way. The studio's acoustics were designed to minimize reflection, to absorb sound rather than bounce it around. But she could have sworn she heard that wobbled F sharp come back to her, perfectly clear, a fraction of a second after she'd played it. Maya lowered her violin, frowning. She'd been in dozens of practice rooms over the years. Sound didn't behave like that in properly treated spaces. The foam panels, the carpet, the specialized ceiling tiles, they were all designed to deaden reflection, not amplify it. She played the passage again, slower this time, listening carefully. Clean notes, and then the slight sharp on the F normal. Nothing came back. Maybe she'd imagined it. Long days at her day job, late nights practicing, her ears could be playing tricks on her. The mind heard what it expected to hear sometimes. But as she positioned her bow for another attempt, Maya noticed something else. The room felt different. Not visually. The lighting was the same warm amber. The mirror still reflected her familiar practice setup. But the air itself seemed denser somehow, as if the walls were listening more intently than usual. She shook her head. Perfectionism made you paranoid. Every musician knew that. When you spent hours dissecting every microscopic flaw in your playing, you started hearing problems that weren't there. Maya raised her violin again. This time, she would play it perfectly. The F sharp wobbled again, and again, that impossible echo. Maya stopped playing entirely, holding her breath. The studio fell silent, but not the empty silence she expected. This was a waiting silence, pregnant with possibility. She could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips where they pressed against the violin strings. She tried a different passage, a gentle melody from the second movement. Her intonation was solid through the first 8 measures. Then she flubbed a shift to 5th position, the note coming out flat and ugly. There it was again. The echo. Not of her correct notes, but of the mistake. The flat note came back to her, clean and distinct, as if the room were repeating it back for her consideration. Maya set down her violin, hands trembling slightly. Practice rooms didn't work like that. Sound absorption materials didn't selectively reflect only wrong notes. It was acoustically impossible, unless she was losing her mind. She'd heard of musicians developing audio hallucinations from too much isolated practice. Phantom notes, imagined harmonies, false echoes. Maybe the pressure she'd been putting on herself was finally catching up, but she had to be sure. Maya picked up her violin and played a simple C major scale. 8 notes, ascending, each one perfectly in tune. No echoes, no reflections. The foam walls absorbed the sound exactly as they should. Then she played the scale again, but deliberately sharpened the fourth note. The F rang out harsh and wrong, and immediately, there it was. The same sharp F, coming back to her from somewhere in the room's acoustic space. Her mouth went dry. She moved to the corner farthest from the mirror, thinking maybe some weird reflection angle was causing the effect. But when she played another wrong note, a scratchy bow changed that produced an ugly scraping sound. It came back to her just as clearly. The room was learning her mistakes. Maya pressed her back against the foam-covered wall, violin hanging loose in her grip. The material felt different against her shoulders. Not soft and absorbent, but somehow denser, as if it were packed more tightly than before, as if it were listening through her skin. She forced herself to breathe slowly. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe the studio's sound system was malfunctioning, creating some kind of feedback loop. Maybe there was a recording device she hadn't noticed, playing back fragments of her practice session. But as she looked around the familiar room, everything appeared normal. The same acoustic panels, the same carpet, the same mirror reflecting her pale, worried face. Then she heard it. Without touching her violin, without making any sound at all, she heard her flat F sharp from 5 minutes ago. Just once, soft but unmistakable, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Maya's grip tightened on her violin neck. The room wasn't just echoing her mistakes. It was collecting them, storing them, and now it was playing them back on its own schedule. She glanced at the door. The red recording light was off, just as it had been when she'd entered. But something was definitely recording. Something was listening to every imperfect note she played, cataloging each flaw, each moment of musical failure. And it was getting stronger. Maya bolted for the door, but the key card reader blinked red. She swiped again. Red. The magnetic lock held firm. No, no, no. She pulled at the handle, swiped frantically. Nothing. Behind her, the room began to sing. Every mistake she'd made over the past hour started playing simultaneously. The wobbled F sharp, the flat shift, the scratchy bow change, all of them layering over each other in a grotesque symphony of imperfection. But they weren't chaotic. They were organized, structured, building into something that almost resembled music. Maya spun around, pressing her back against the locked door. The sound was coming from the walls themselves, as if the foam panels had become speakers. But more than that, the acoustic space was changing. The room felt larger, the ceiling higher, sound bouncing and swirling in ways that defied the physical dimensions. She covered her ears, but the music penetrated anyway. Not just heard, but felt, vibrating through her bones, resonating in her chest cavity. Each wrong note hit like a physical blow, and there were dozens of them now, maybe hundreds. How many mistakes had she made over the years? How many imperfect notes had she played in practice rooms just like this one? The realization hit her like ice water. This wasn't just about tonight. Every wrong note she'd ever played in every soundproofed room was somehow here, collected and amplified. The entity, whatever it was, had been following her, feeding on her musical failures, growing stronger with each flawed practice session. "Stop!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the cacophony. The mirror began to show something impossible. Her reflection was playing violin, but the notes coming from the reflection didn't match what she was doing. Mirror Maya was playing all her mistakes at once, fingers moving in impossible patterns, bow flying across strings that shouldn't exist. Panic flooded her system. Maya raised her real violin, bow shaking violently. Maybe she played perfectly. Absolutely perfectly. The thing would let her go. Maybe it only wanted flawed music, and perfection would starve it. She began a Vivaldi passage, fighting to control her trembling hands. The first few notes were clean, cutting through the chaos of echoed mistakes. For a moment, the cacophony lessened, but perfection under this kind of pressure was impossible. Her bow skittered across the string, producing a harsh scrape. Immediately, the sound was absorbed and repeated, added to the growing symphony. The room pulsed. The foam wall seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting with each accumulated mistake. The ceiling pressed lower, or maybe the floor rose. Maya couldn't tell anymore. The acoustic space was warping, becoming a throat that swallowed imperfection and sang it back transformed. She tried again, desperate now. Simple scales, basic exercises, anything she could play perfectly. But her terror made precision impossible. Each mistake fed the thing, made it stronger, made the pressure more intense. The mirror showed her reflection multiplying, dozens of Mayas playing dozens of instruments, all of them wrong, all of them feeding the entity that lived in the spaces between notes. Then she understood. The thing didn't just want her mistakes. It wanted her perfectionism. Her desperate need to be flawless was what gave it power. Every time she tried to correct herself, every time she repeated a passage seeking perfection, she was feeding it more. Maya lowered her violin. The cacophony swirled around her, but she stopped fighting it. Maybe the only way out was to stop trying to be perfect. Maya played one deliberate wrong note. Not a mistake born of fear or pressure, but a conscious choice. A flat, ugly, perfectly imperfect sound that she didn't try to correct or repeat. She just let it hang in the air, accepting it as part of the music. The cacophony faltered. She played another wrong note, and another. Not fighting them, not trying to fix them. Just playing imperfectly on purpose, with intention rather than desperate precision. The pressure in the room lessened. The wall stopped pulsing. The mirror returned, showing only her actual reflection, pale, sweating, but playing with strange new freedom. The keycard reader blinked green. Maya didn't run. She packed her violin carefully, deliberately, refusing to let panic consume her. The wrong notes still echoed softly around the room, but they sounded different now, not like failures, but like choices. She walked to the door, swiped her card, and stepped into the empty hallway. Behind her, practice room 7 fell silent. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and late-night radio. Maya kept her windows down despite the October chill, needing to hear the sounds of the normal world, traffic, sirens, the hum of electrical transformers. Real sounds from real sources. Her apartment building was quiet, most residents already asleep. Maya climbed the 3 flights to her door, keys jingling in the stairwell. Home. Safety. Her own space where sound behaved according to the laws of physics. She unlocked her apartment and stepped inside. That's when she heard it. The flat F sharp from her practice session, coming from somewhere in her living room. Maya froze in the doorway, hand still on the light switch. The sound came again, soft but unmistakable, drifting from the direction of her music corner where her practice violin rested on its stand. She flicked on the lights. Everything looked normal, her music stand, her metronome, stacks of sheet music. But the air felt dense, familiar, the same waiting quality she'd noticed in practice room 7. It had followed her home, not through physical space, but through sound itself. Through the connection between her mistakes and whatever lived in the spaces where music went wrong. Every practice room she'd ever used, every imperfect note she'd played, they were all connected now, all feeding the same growing consciousness. Maya walked to her violin case and opened it. The instrument gleamed under the apartment's warm lighting, beautiful and treacherous. She touched the strings gently, not applying enough pressure to make sound. From the walls around her came a soft echo of her wobbled F sharp from months ago, a scratchy bow change from last spring. The ghost of every flawed practice session she'd ever had. The entity wasn't trapped in practice room 7. It lived everywhere musicians sought perfection and found only human limitation. It fed on the gap between what was intended and what was achieved, growing stronger with each frustrated repetition, each desperate attempt to play without flaw. Maya closed the violin case and looked around her apartment. Every surface seemed to pulse with potential sound, ready to reflect her mistakes back to her. She would have to learn to live with imperfection. Not just accept it, but embrace it. Because the alternative was feeding the thing that lived between the notes forever.